You can have all the good intentions in the world for the kind of place you want to create, the world of work that you want people to show up in. But if you're not aware of the patterning that takes over when things get stressful, you don't have hope.
Welcome to the Being Human is Good for Business podcast. In each episode, the leadership development experts at Trilogy Effect explore how the process of self-discovery unleashes potential in us all. Now here's your host, Sherilyn Starkey.
Hello, I'm your host, Sherilyn Starkey, and welcome to the Being Human is Good for Business podcast. Today, I'm joined by the three founding partners of Trilogy Effect, the leadership development experts. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
So here we are. It's January. So this is the typical time of year that people are making resolutions and they're trying to change their lives. So I thought it would be kind of cool to just take this opportunity to improve a lot more than my downward facing dog. Let's look at the Enneagram and what your type is. And Heather, can you tell us a little bit about what exactly is Enneagram all about, and how can discovering what your type is help you to become a better leader?
Okay. Well, the Enneagram is a tool or a system, really, of self-discovery and self-awareness. And it also is a way to start discovering and learning more about humankind, really. It's a system of 9 personality archetypes. Said another way, 9 different habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting that show up in humankind. So when you start to learn about those 9 archetypes, you will discover that all of them, to some degree, are resonant for you. I mean, it's a holistic system, so we can resonate and appreciate each of the types. And there will be one where we get fixated, which we call, it's called your dominant type. And what that means is when we're at our best, human beings are dynamic and fluid, and we are going with the flow, adapting and adjusting and being appropriate to the situation in the moment. However, life has a way of pressing on us, we have stresses and strains and losses and challenges. And in order to cope with that, we start becoming a little bit more patterned. We start getting a little reactive and trying to become more effective. But the irony is that often we're becoming less so. We're starting to run our patterns. We're starting to become habitual, and we're using our go-to strategy to try and get the needs met here. In fact, what's usually happening is we're getting a little overwhelmed, our system's getting flooded, and we're becoming less of ourselves and more of our pattern.
So how does one go about discovering their Enneagram type?
There are a lot of different ways to do it. There are online diagnostics, basically questionnaires and surveys. We use a deck of cards, which Wendy developed. Anything will work as a starting point. But the key to discovering your type is that there is no external system that we've found yet that can tell you what your type is. It requires you to learn which ones are starting to make you more curious and do the internal reflection required to come up with, that's probably the one. When I think about the one that kind of drives me when I take my hands off the wheel, that's probably the one that is dominant for me. And that's why we like Wendy's cards. It's a manual card sort process. We kind of have a bias towards that, although anything works. But the reason for our bias is because when people use an online survey tool, it gives you this false sense of certainty that this external system has told me what my type is. And it might stop us from looking further. And what we like about the manual card sorting process is it requires some engagement with the material. It requires some questioning. It's not some external system saying, well, you're this type. Mm-hmm. It is much more a guidance system to help you discover for yourself what's really going on inside of you.
So I spend some time going through the cards and I decide that I think I know what my type is. How do I use this knowledge to be a better leader?
Well, it's often said that discovering your dominant type is the booby prize.
Oh, right.
It's kind of the so what? What do I do with this? Which is really what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when you start to really discover what the Enneagram has to offer, because once you see the patterning in your internal landscape, it also gives you the key to getting out of the box you're in. You start to see that I don't need to be defined by my habitual patterns, which tend to be often when we're at our worst. Mm-hmm. That's when our patterns really show up. And nobody wants to be defined by that. And when you start to understand what's shaping those patterns, the fears, but the basic desires and the fundamental gifts that are truly behind all of that, you're starting to find your true north. You're starting to find out that, for example, if I'm a type 8, then my domineering, bullying personality at times is hiding a big tender heart, a huge care for what's going on in the world and the people I love. And so instead of hiding behind my fears, I can start being more present to what's really much more true about who I am. And that's who I can bring to the situation instead of the, domineering bully.
Okay.
You see how the patterning of your dominant Enneagram type also shows up, particularly in the what's called the below the line reactive tendencies, and also the gifts that show up above the line when you're at your best.
And Sherilyn, I wouldn't language it as striving to be your best. I think there's a relaxing into it because you're not in the grip of your reactive patterns. And so there's this inner freedom and spaciousness that you feel where you can just respond to the moment. And it actually feels really good. When we're in our reactive self, it generally doesn't feel so good. The striving enables the reactive tendencies. It's the lack of striving that opens us up to our creative capacities.
Thou shalt not strive.
You know what? If there was a New Year's resolution that we could make for 2021, that would be it.
Yeah.
There's no need. As a matter of fact, that's what gets us into trouble.
Right.
It takes us away from being here now and the truth of what's going on.
Yeah, because, if you look at the 9 types, you'd say for the perfectionist, striving to be perfect. And that sets up a whole chain reaction of behaviors. Or type 3, striving to achieve constantly and hit goals. That creates a whole set of patterns and reactive behaviors behind it.
Never enough. I'm never enough. I'm only as good as my last win.
Right.
Instead of being good enough.
Exactly. And a lot of these striving behaviors are completely being run by our beliefs about our self-worth and self-value.
So what I'm hearing here, ladies, and I gotta tell you, it's making me really happy. We don't need New Year's resolutions, right? We resolve to not resolve.
Yeah.
I love that.
Honestly.
Let's look at some practical tips that we can all take to be happier at work and to becoming better at leading our teams. What is the Leadership Circle profile and why should we get one this year?
So it is the best Leadership 360 that I've worked with. And it's distinct from any that I've worked with. Traditionally, Heather, Mary Beth, and I have done interviews for our 360s, and we love getting that level of input and hearing directly from the evaluators. But this one gives us something distinct from that, and it really is a very holistic system. We use the Enneagram extensively with our clients, and actually the Enneagram is baked into this, so they really dovetail well together. But it has a very positive slant to it. What it does is it focuses on what are called creative capacities.
So this is when you have a coaching client and you spend some time talking to their peers, their bosses, the people that report to them. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you want to literally get a 360-degree view into someone, into a leader, because often leaders will relate differently to their peers than their boss, than the people that work for them, than stakeholders. They can show up the same or they can show up differently. And so a 360 will give you that look into how you relate to different people at different who have different roles in your organization or in your world.
Sounds a little scary.
I think it can be. It can be very confronting, absolutely. But without feedback, how do we know where to focus our efforts, and how do we know what strengths to amplify? Otherwise, we're just living inside our own skin. Mm-hmm. And there's a great expression: it takes at least two to know one.
Right.
So, yeah, this is one way to do that in a really, really constructive way.
And how did you come across kind of this tool, the Leadership Circle Profile?
At least 10 years ago, a friend and colleague told me about it. And she said, Wendy, you really should learn this, that you really should get skilled and certified in the Leadership Circle because you love the Enneagram, you work with the Enneagram. And the opportunity came for Mary Beth, Heather, and I to really explore this in more depth and get certified in it.
So how has it changed how you work with your clients?
Well, we've largely stopped doing the interviewing for a 360 and added this, and it is giving so much depth and direction to the work that we do with clients in a coaching context. That, as I said, paired with the Enneagram, and you can see how one's Enneagram type actually shows up in their results. And one of the things that it does, the person, the leader who takes this evaluation themselves, so you can actually see the gap or alignment between how I see me and how you see me and experience me, and what my ripple effect is in a whole series of dimensions.
So this is an online tool? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. So they take it online. Take it online, and then we get reports, and there's actually an interpretation manual that goes with it. So it's really allowed us to see much more clearly where we can focus our efforts in a coaching context. And then this also ripples out there. There's another tool inside of this called the Collective Leadership Assessment. So you can really look at the leadership culture of an organization as well. So that's a separate and very related, closely related tool.
So as a leader, what can I expect to learn by getting this online profile done?
Well, you'll start to see your ripple effect and where you're putting your energy. And is it going more in a series of different kinds of reactive tendencies, or is it more focused in your creative capacities?
Can you explain those two terms, the creative competencies and the reactive tendencies?
Yeah, so the reactive tendencies are, if you think of it as where am I placing my time, attention, and energy, and you think of it as that playing not to lose strategy. I'm playing it safe. So I might have a predisposition or a tendency to go into high control, be more autocratic, or I'm making decisions and behaving and playing not to lose by having a high need to belong or to please other people. Or I'm holding back and withholding and distancing myself. So those would be some of the reactive tendencies. And they have a direct relationship to the creative capacities. So less of the reactive tendencies opens the space for these creative capacities to be utilized. And that's the playing to win strategy, where I'm going for it. I'm not acting out of fear. It's the me versus the we.
Can you give me a couple of examples of creative capacities?
Absolutely. Courageous authenticity, getting results, fostering team play.
So these are all things that we aspire to be very good at as leaders.
Absolutely. Purposeful and visionary. And so this looks at, are we seen as using them or not using them to our full ability?
I've been working with a guy as coaching and with his leadership team now for a year. And I mentioned the leadership circle to him, and he went online and he took it just
That's
himself.
Right. Yes.
Self-assessment. And in our last coaching call, we took a look at his results.
Yeah.
And then I explained what Wendy's talking about, which is when you look at your results below the line, these are reactive tendencies, which means you're gifted in these areas, but you're probably working harder than you need to. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily putting your best foot forward.
Yes.
Whereas above the line, you have these kind of creative competencies. And when you're at your best, these really are you showing up powerfully and effectively.
Right.
And he looked at it and he said, you know what? This is freaking me right out. And I said, no, I'm sorry. He said, no. I mean, in a good way. This is freaking me out. Yeah. Because he already knew that he was a type 2 on the Enneagram.
Right.
And he knew that in meetings and his boss is trying to have him show up more powerfully because he knows how good he is with staff and how effective he is at strategic thinking. But when he's amongst different groups, he shuts down. And his boss is looking for everything he has to give, but he's getting reactive and not showing up. Right. And so this was freaking him out because he finally could see it in, living color, how by pulling and playing, as Wendy said, not to lose, instead of just relaxing into, I've got something to contribute here because I'm competent in this area. And he was shutting himself down unnecessarily.
Because when you take the free profile, obviously it's just you reporting on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it orients them to this and how they're currently seeing themselves, because it's always a point in time. But then to be able to see yourself and how others see you is really powerful. But just seeing the model itself, you can start working with it. And so much research went into developing this model. It's rich.
So not only are you getting a sense of feedback on your leadership, you also get to see how you measure against a world database on leadership. And so you get to see how much of your potential is being used, whether you're in balance between relationship and task. It's very well benchmarked.
So you use this tool at the beginning of your coaching projects or engagements with your clients. So it's the basis for everything that's going forward. So it kind of sounds like a good place to start in January, right?
Absolutely. Could set the stage for your year going forward and where you want to focus your efforts. And really the beauty of this is it's like a spider web, and you pull on one strand and it makes all the other strands move. So it's not like now I've got my self-improvement program. It's not that at all. It's like one strength that I want to amplify that will diminish some of my reactivity in certain other areas. And then it just seems to affect everything else.
A lot of us start new initiatives in January. So let's say we work on getting our leadership circle profile filled out, and we work on figuring out what Enneagram type we are, and that kind of sets the stage. But how do we keep it going? How do we make an ongoing commitment to our personal growth, our professional growth as leaders, something that we can stick to and work on all year round?
This is a great question. And, in this time of New Year's resolutions, please don't relate to anything that we discussed so far as a self-improvement plan or a fix-it plan, because you're not broken. And taking on your development is a hero's journey. It is not for the faint of heart. It requires compassion for yourself and the process, curiosity about what you'll learn about yourself along the way, and a heaping helping of courage too, really. So why would anyone embark on this journey? Why would anyone roll up their sleeves and delve into their own development? Truly it will lead to some greater self-awareness. You'll learn more about your automatic wiring, your unconscious wiring, your blind spots, what triggers you, what kind of reactivates you. For me, I learned a lot about how I distract myself from what I'd like to avoid feeling or experiencing. When I first started this development journey, a side benefit that I hadn't anticipated was gaining clarity about the people in my life. When some of the stuff, kind of dropped away, I could see the people that I was in life with and at work with more clearly for who they truly are. So it led to really improved relationships with people and more effective ways of relating to others. So there was an unexpected side bonus for me. Committing to your development will bring some improved clarity about your gifts too. What's important to you, your beliefs, your values, your purpose. I'm reminded of a Mary Oliver quote. Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. And I think that is something that is really up for people right now in this time of COVID is, okay, the floor has dropped out from underneath us and what's really important. And so this development journey can bring some real clarity to that too, like who you are, what you want to spend your time and energy and focus your efforts on. So I don't know, it seems, again, it's a hero's journey. It's not an easy path and it's so worth it. This self-development journey can really increase one's resilience because I don't know if anyone else is feeling depleted by 2020 and, everything, but I am. And I am grateful for the muscles that I've developed around, navigating change and being with the unexpected and dealing with stress and strain and challenges. So this is something, another side benefit of ongoing development is this increased resilience, or at least ability to just be with what is versus wanting to be with what you wish it was. I wish I had a more articulate way to say that, but
That's perfect. It's what the Buddhists always talk about. The root of all suffering is resisting what is.
Thanks to the Trilogy Effect partners, Heather Marasse, Wendy Appel, and Mary Beth Sawicki for joining me on today's show. I am going to get working. I know I've said this before, but I'm really going to get working on this stuff. And I find you ladies just so inspiring. And I hope our listeners do too. So thanks to all of you out there who have downloaded this episode of the show. Please subscribe to our podcast using any of your podcast apps. We're everywhere. We are on iHeartRadio. We are on Listen Notes. We are on Amazon. We are on Apple. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you will find us. So please subscribe and tell your friends and tell your family and tell anybody you think could use a resource to help them become happier and better leaders in their lives. And if you have time, please leave us a rating or a review. Because that will help other people find our podcast, and we would appreciate it very much. I'm your host, Sherry Lynn Starkey, and this is the Being Human is Good for Business podcast.